Welcome back, YouTube, to Fast Gadgets. Today we're going to talk about Linux in the news. I always keep an eye on Slashdot, and there's often articles in the news about Linux, and some were pretty significant changes that I thought I would go over. The first one was somewhat of a surprise. Debian has indicated that they will no longer include support for older i386 32-bit processors, and the list includes the AMD K5, K6 2, and K6 3 processors, Cyrix 3s or Cyrix, depending on how you want to pronounce it, the Intel Pentium and Pentium with MMX, and some VIA C3 processors. So to me that was disappointing to hear, but I do understand not supporting the older architectures over time. We have to keep in mind also that it doesn't include just Debian. It would include anybody who is a derivative of Debian, like Ubuntu, although Ubuntu probably hasn't supported many of these processors for some time. Basically, what I'm seeing is older processors like these and PowerPC 32-bit processors in general are having waning support for modern operating systems, so there's almost no modern operating system that you can get for these processors, which to me kind of creates the divide between old computers that are still viable for use today versus vintage computing, where we have computers that basically, they can only run an older version of the operating system, and what it becomes is a snapshot in time of what the hardware and the software could do back in the day. So, very sad, but again, it's a matter of practicality. When you've got open source coding, how many of the coders are going to be willing to support older hardware when you have a diminishing number of users for it? So these computer technologies, these CPUs, like the PowerPC, the AMD K5, K6, are going to slip into the vintage computing area. So very sad, but once again, it's understandable. In DistroWatch, it was noted that Linux Mint 18, the latest distro for Linux Mint, will no longer have many of the popular codecs built in. Linux was one of the distributions that had many of the commercial and proprietary codecs that were non-open source built in, so right out of the box you basically could use the system for anything you wanted. And functionality-wise, you were able to do watch any videos you wanted, listen to MP3s, pretty much anything that we come to expect in a Mac system or a Windows system. So what they've done is they've removed all of the multimedia codecs from their distribution altogether, so they no longer need the no codec distribution of Linux Mint 18. So apparently you can add those later during the installation if you wanted to. So they're trying to support it, but at the same time it will not be built in, and it's something you can do later or during installation. And it makes sense to me. It is open source after all, so now they don't have to worry about having any code as a part of their distribution that doesn't belong. The user would have to install anything that was commercial or proprietary. If you are a Raspbian user over on Slashdot, apparently we've seen a major update. So if you're using a Raspberry Pi 3, it has the built-in Bluetooth and Wi-Fi support. There wasn't very good tools. There were drivers available, but you had to use the command line to do anything in Bluetooth. So now they've released a couple of things in this new revision. One, they have a GUI tool for Bluetooth so that you can do a search for Bluetooth devices. Now, the support isn't complete, so as I understand, supported devices right now are keyboard, mouse, and audio. So it's not like you're going to connect it to your TV or something like that. But that Bluetooth support was missing, and there were some basic GUI things that you could not do, like right-clicking on the wastebasket was one of them, apparently. So if you're using Raspberry Pi, you probably want to grab, well, rather the Raspberry Pi 3, you probably want to grab the latest distro of Raspbian. And on CIO, there was an article. This article was written by, and forgive me if I don't pronounce the name right, Swapnil Bhartia. He's saying that Greg Hartman, Coroa Hartman, pointed out that Linux is basically the largest code project, development project in the world. And he had some pretty astounding points to make. One, he said the latest kernel release, 4.5, apparently has 21 million lines of code. 21 million. And he said that his laptop runs about 1.6 million lines of code, where your phone runs about 2.5 million lines. And he also said that updates on the kernel is about 10,800 lines added, 5,300 lines removed, and 1,875 lines that are modified every day. And the author of the article went on to say that this is basically 8 changes per second, which is absolutely amazing. There's so many contributors to the kernel and to different packages available in Linux that its development is fierce, to say the least. And it gets vetted, so many developers add their code, it gets tested, distributions review it, they add what they need, it gets pushed out, the various distributions add some more changes. So the Linux kernel is definitely a very, very, very large worldwide development package. The last thing I was going to mention, a little bit older, about a month old, but as many of you know, Microsoft and Canonical are going to add the Linux as you know, Microsoft and Canonical are going to add the Bash shell into Windows. So many have debated about why that is. What is it that Microsoft hopes to get from it? Well, looking at it in a big picture view, basically Microsoft's in a position where they really can't ignore Linux anymore. Many of the developers that are out there do like to develop using Linux tools, but they use a Windows platform as their daily driver. So now we're going to have somewhat of a mix of these two different elements, and it'll allow developers to develop code, and they won't leave the Microsoft environment that they're used to, and they won't lose more Windows installed user base. I think it just makes sense for Microsoft. It's not really harmful as far as I can tell. Canonical is going to provide the support for the Bash shell and some of the built-in tools that'll be a part of Windows and the Linux Bash shell available on Windows. So I'm pretty excited to try it out. I think I'm going to try and download the preview, the Windows 10 preview, and get a look at it and see what it does and what it's capable of. I understand that there's many tools that will not work in the Windows environment. You have to keep in mind that we don't actually have the kernel running underneath. It's just the Bash shell. So as far as the reading that I've done, there's many tools and applications that will not run that are native to Linux. Hope this was helpful to you. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. And if you have any comments, I'd be happy to hear them, especially the constructive ones. See you next time.